This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill.
Do not be afraid. We are now in control of what you hear.
1, 2, 3, testing.
A journey to the far reaches of knowledge and the unknown.
I can't believe I just saw that.
From aliens to angels, conspiracies to cover-ups.
One soul and preeminent power.
From extraterrestrials to exposing the truth.
I'll try and explain as much as I can.
You're listening to Planet X.
You're listening to Planet X.
Planet X. This is Planet X. Planet X.
Broadcasting to you from the studios of Planet X, this is The Tony Topping Show. Good evening, it's 8 o'clock, it's the Tony Topping Show, we're back with you. Hello, 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 how are you all? What are you up to, and what are you doing out there in the big wide world tonight? It's all very interesting goings on with Syria, and next week we've got episode 2 of Breaking the Matrix, with a new kind of current affairs financial conspiracy show. We're trying to hook up an interview with George Galloway, which we will do in due course, and we're making sure that it's all going to be very interesting stuff once we get him on the show. I think the things are going to really take off. We're going to get some guest lines up. It's going to be absolutely excellent. Some listeners have been emailing me some questions regarding myself, and really, it's when it comes to the dark side of espionage and UFO experiences going through hijinks, my story is one to be concerned about when it comes to outside agencies sticking in their nose in the lives of the world's citizens, and they usually do this rudely and abruptly and in sneering ways. When what an explorer actually needs is compassion and someone to talk to. But instead we are often met by the strange, cold, powerful forces who treat us like meat from a lamb usually sent off to the slaughter, where we never forget what it sounds like when the lambs scream. Our voices will not be stopped, and it really won't. And so I'm gonna, we fire one more catapult at the wall of secrecy with my radio show, my website, all the work that I do. Oddly enough, dear listener, I sometimes feel the old Manchurian candidate programming kick in, where the accepted view of the world is acceptable to me, and that's a very odd feeling indeed. But luckily I know different. I know not to trust the world around me after all the experiences I have had. So it's all very interesting, and readers have been, readers and listeners of my website and listeners to the Tony Topping Show have been sending in questions, because they may not have heard of me, and I think that Planet X has nearly now, Neil's show on a Sunday has an audience, I think, of over 45,000 people all across the world, so there's a possibility some people may not have seen my website. Somebody's asked, some listener sent in an email to say, would you give some background on yourself before your UFO encounters began? So, I've been dominated by paranormal experiences all my life from age 2. My father was a very psychic man, and he could actually collapse me onto the bed with a headache. I really never got on with him. My background was acting and then security management, but I do this UFO stuff full time, although it's not easy. I'm a specialist contributor and writer, now becoming a broadcaster, on paranormal espionage and UFOs. And that I've been witness to some insane goings-on. I really have. Can't lead a normal life. I've been attacked by UFOs twice, one in a farmer's field and another There was one in a farmer's field and another when I was walking home from work, believe it or not. It's a very long story, but basically the world is not as it appears to be. There are forces that have been around mankind for a very long time that we don't see around us, that are kind of like removed from our reality as a general populace. And that's a very interesting story, because the UFO situations has its tentacles in many things, including Antarctica. Britain had operations in Antarctica under something called Operation Tabalan. I've been filmed by unmarked helicopters on 2 occasions. We're going to, I think in the coming weeks, we're going to do something, or we have done something with a company called Filterview Films, where I take the audience or the viewer through the experience of being on film by a helicopter. I've been followed. I've had the phone calls. I'll probably go to the grave not knowing what happened to me, but my first initial UFO encounter was in 1992, and one listener asks, can you tell us about my initial UFO encounter and what took place? So there we go, Barry. What took place? Well, I was coming back from rehearsal. I was training to be an actor, and over my house appeared a small UFO. It's like something out of Close Encounters. It was blinking and flashing. It was there one minute, it was gone the next. And it was the primary UFO incident that triggered my harassment of military helicopters, all that kind of thing. And that was because of a UFO that flew over my housing estate and illuminated a TV antenna. This illumination of the TV antenna turns out to be a predictive gesture, I think, of something that's happening to me now, so they can see what's coming down the line, as it were, which is interesting. It took me years to work it out. So I had it looked at, this piece of footage, by a special effects director who concluded it was not a plane. This object appeared on and off for a period of 3 months. It appeared here, there and everywhere from May 1999 until about November 1999. And there's been some excellent image analysis done by Stefan, who we had on a few weeks back on the Tony Topping Show. He did some excellent analysis over what I was filming in November, which he claims is a drop-a-stone UFO. In fact, his question was, what the hell was I filming? And that's a good question. I used to be addicted to it. I used to go out with the camcorder on quite a few occasions and film UFOs. It becomes quite addictive, but I do advise that there's more to life than... I'm a professional, really, at what I do now. But there's more to life than UFOs. It can become obsessive, and there is a mental cost, most definitely a mental cost. So, having the crazy phone calls on the deployment of mind control technology is certainly something that's particularly nasty in this day and age. And there's a interesting article in last week's show regarding PRISM, the surveillance state, and going beyond that with mind control technology, which is extremely sinister, of which our governments know. Our governments do know about this technology, but they tend to keep it quiet. And somebody's asking, what do you think they came for you? I keep saying, Have you heard the politicians? They always do that, don't they? They go, and, if we're going to bomb the civilian population after they've been gassed by their own government, I think that's the acceptable thing to do, and Britain must take a stand, while they flog chemical weapons to them. But that's another story. It's got me so angry as all that, the hypocrisy. So anyway, Brian is asking, after Barry, Brian now asks, why do you think these UFOs came for you, and do you see any type of aliens? So we're in an interconnected world. We make no apology for the fact that I see these things that go on. I don't really talk about it all that much in public because it has no resemblance. ET contact with off-world intelligences and people in UFO objects has no resemblance to some of the dross written on the net for, we are all going to be ambassadors to the Space Brothers are here to save us routine, which you hear so often. Doesn't happen like that. Three types are there are three types, I say, again, if I say that one more time. The types I deal with are also written of in something called the Smersh UFO Handbook. You may ask, what's that about? Well, it's Smersh, dear listener, but it's not the Smersh you would think of out of James Bond 007. Oh, no. It is Smersh, meaning deaf to spies, one of Russia's top spy agencies that did counter-espionage against the Germans. And they knew a trick or two, and they were issued with handbooks. Somebody sent me an email to say, a guy in Spain, sent me an email to say he was clearing out his granddad's loft. He worked in the diplomatic service in the Russian embassy and found a handbook called the Extraterrestrial Handbook, it is called, to do with, on standard issue, to Smersh. Interestingly, of these Smersh agents had this handbook with a list and details of villages and children and people who had contact or were abducted by extraterrestrials, which is absolutely fascinating. I'm trying to get hold of a copy, but I can't seem to get hold of one. But now that you're asking me, I make no apology to say, because we live in an interconnected world, and this is quite normal for me, as I've been at it for years doing this, that some are Nordic in appearance, some are Oriental, with pointed faces and copper hair. You'll certainly know about it if you see one. The impression will never leave you. Which is why, as Harry Drew said on the show 2 weeks back, some of these military men were shocked because the appearance of them, you live in a society where you're not conditioned to accept their appearance, so it's a bit of a shocker at first. You'll look in fascination at them because they don't look like us, and yet strangely enough they do. That's a big elephant in the room because we're led to believe that they all look like greys. So Corso was certainly right when he said the US Army had to assess them as a foreign power, because that's exactly what they are. That may sound very odd, but you have to do it that way or you won't survive in this game. You just won't survive it. So there's no getting away with it, really. India assessed that the human race was a project. This is interesting. I also found that India, in doing my studies on all this, in trying to piece together what happened to me, India discovered that there was something called a Type 4 intelligence. Now, I consider that one of the reasons why I'm having so much psi activity is because some type of intelligence that is unknown even to UFO occupants has touched me. So we're not coming from a position of the old ambassador to aliens and I'm the special one bullshit, because it doesn't work like that in real life. As I've said, veterans who have dealt with UFOs in the military will tell you how shocking it all is, and it certainly is. But we make no apology for saying what I've tried to piece together, and it was from a think tank in India that was leaking stuff into their own press via various media regarding the study of UFOs. We investigated it and the trail went cold. But they concluded, and they'd really thought this out, whoever these scientists were in India, that the human race was a projection of a higher intelligence, which they call the Type 5. Type 5 intelligence. And I hazarded a guess that some of us contain an essence of this within us, which is why some individuals are having higher elements of UFO activity around them, and some people are not in some cases. But it's very advanced stuff what we're dealing with to try and get to the bottom of all this, as far as I'm concerned. So the universe is a mysterious place, even for the human race, and even for them. It certainly is. And I'll hazard a guess that we will discover marine life on Europa and water planets, the like of which we've not seen before. I think that's a future prediction I can certainly make. Certainly can. Now, somebody else asked, Lynn from Sussex is asking, have I had possible energy weapons? Have I had some experience with possible energy weapons being used on me to correct me in some way, and black helicopters? So, well, yes, I have. I was stalked by a real goon squad of crazies that even make the CIA look tame, really. Absolute bonkers. Absolutely bonkers, and no way of proving it. No way of proving it, you see. But it's a long story. That really is a long story, and it happened to me between 1999 and 2003. I call myself a Jason Bourne, a paranormal Jason Bourne, because the reason why is because I'm like a man who's looking for his identity, but in a paranormal way, as to the reason why all this was going on. So, and also that mindset that you see in the Bourne Ultimatum, whereby the Guardian journalist and everybody's after him, that mindset that comes after Bourne, and this brutal mindset that you're not quite trained for is very interesting. An author called Irene Allen is coming out with a book called Codename Blue Star, a book I was involved with in which details MI6 operations in espionage, in paranormal espionage, should I say. And what comes across in the book is the brutal tragedy of how spiritual advancements, a sector of the mind that we use for spiritual purposes is used for mayhem and murder and chaos and remote viewing for military purposes and all this kind of thing. And there's a brutality to it that you can't put into words. And I was awoken at 4 o'clock in the morning from a mind control attack, 2001 in January, similar to being stabbed in the head, a bit like Hitchcock Psycho style. It was horrendous. And what is sinister about it is they relax you while at the same time attacking you. And that's very, very sinister. Very sinister indeed. They identify themselves as a UFO secret police. I thought I was going to die. I didn't think I would wake up. And it's not the first time I've stared danger in the face with all this. Technology would often wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Bangs, thumps, screams. Hideous, absolutely horrendous. Woken to go to the toilet is another one, which is absolutely horrifying. The technology is out there and people must wake up to this. They really, really must wake up to it, and so must those who advocate the surveillance state. I understand the need for this in the protection of terrorism. It does go on, and I stress that again, that I understand that, but there is something that has gone seriously absent without leave with all this intelligence and security, which would, with the infrastructure in place of compartmentalisation, mean quite easily that a gang of clowns that have obtained advanced mind control technology would be able to do this kind of thing and get away with it with apparent ease, as they have done, and that seems to be the case. The question was always, who are they? And that was a caper in itself, actually, having to be followed by them, and have remarks uttered to me in reference to the antics they were doing. It's quite nasty. So it was a private war, really, and it is a private war, still thundering along. The system of delivery they used to do all this to me, which I will keep speaking out about, and the messenger will get shot, I can guarantee that, was very advanced in a technology that somehow the signalling system is part biological and part something else. Very advanced indeed. Anyway, I was filmed by an AS555 helicopter, which is in the public domain. If you check out my YouTube channel, it was identified by Jane's Defence Weekly as a unmarked helicopter that was on issue not to British forces, which is very, very interesting. So it says, another question that's come in is, who are some researchers that respect you in ufology and the surrounding fields? Well, really, I'm a lone wolf, to be quite frank. Nick Redfern, as far as I'm concerned, is a top researcher. Whitley Strieber, I'm a very big fan of. His interviews are very, very interesting. And I have also been honoured to have my work endorsed by Joseph McMoneagle, who was a US Army remote viewer. The US is undergoing, I think, a massive spiritual awakening, bizarre as it may seem, and its lessons are harsh. It certainly is. I believe, odd as it may seem, that the US is undergoing some bizarre spiritual awakening with all the karma, all the imbalance of the left-hand path and the right-hand path, all together. So, a bit of a lone wolf on the research front. People come looking for me. I never go looking for them, and everybody knows where I am. I have met some great people, apart from Nick Pope. I don't like him. Don't like what he did at all. I'm not a fan of Nick Pope. I have been defamed by the BBC during an interview that happened, a TV programme I took part in a few years back. I've learnt to be wiser, but that was purely defamatory. And I've done all kinds of things. I had a bizarre problem with InfoWars, with their censorship. That was really, really odd. Goings on with Mr. Paul Joseph Watson, who somehow thinks that I speak to aliens, and that is a loony thing to do. Well, you have to study, you have to know your onions before you could hit the media with remarks like that, and you've got to study a lot of subjects to understand, a lot of research, a lot of veterans, military veterans, witness testimony and so on and so forth, to understand that that might not be as bonkers as it sounds. I don't stand in the back garden with a tinfoil hat on my head speaking to aliens, but what I will say is this, is that if I go into my local town, which I so often do, people will take the piss out of me. But they do it for a laugh and they're laughing with me. However, 9 times out of 10, individuals always quietly come over to me, and it's individuals who you wouldn't think, people who appear to be cynical. I know of a manager who I used to work with who's into it, but doesn't say publicly that he is, an accountant, somebody else, numerous people, a plumber, a joiner, people who you wouldn't even think, even a football fan, a keen Leeds football fan who came up to me, who was really, really interested in it. But then what they do is they go wandering back to the mates as if they've talked about nothing. So, you know, the British man and woman in our country is very actually clued up on all this, but they keep it quiet. I think it's the part of the British kind of stiff upper just to keep it quiet. But you find that people have studied this subject and made an informed choice, and can live with the fact that somebody like me says, yeah, I've had strange objects over my house, yeah, that's happened, yes, I've been harassed, yes, I've seen what appear to be people who are not like us, and it's normal, the normalisation of that. But of course we have a media at the moment, or I've got to say the mainstream media, people like ITV, Channel 5 and Channel 4 have treated me very well. It's the conspiracy alternative media that has censored me, which is bizarre. Here I am on the Planet X platform yakking on, and there's no censorship so far. And I trust you listen to Neil, Darren and the other guy, Ben, who have all been very supportive of me, and John O'Brien, who's an excellent remote viewer. In fact, an odd incident happened with the Doom Master. He did his Hollow Earth special on Planet X, and I had a UFO incident over the house about 3 weeks ago. I kid you not, they fly over my house, which is bizarre, absolutely bizarre, but they do. All part of a big story, all part of a book I'm writing called Alien Darknet. Alien Darknet is going to be something the like of which you've never seen before, because you've been looking for answers, haven't you? You've been trying to look for answers and you haven't found them in anything you've written, or anything you've seen, or anything, you know, on YouTube. Even the big UFO researchers can't seem to understand what's going on. And so Alien Darknet goes a bit deeper, I feel, into the understanding of what's going on. If we were to look at the Canadian scientist Wilbert Smith, who had an indication from the US government that there was a mental component to UFOs, that is probably what my experiences are all about. You know, it's very interesting. You know, somebody else has asked me, where has your research led you today regarding your experiences knowledge-wise? Could you share some of your other encounters with us? Says Sue. Well, Sue, yes. Okay. My experiences have led me to influence situations and save lives. Odd, as it may seem, but strange things have happened to me, and it's just been odd. That's all I will describe it as. I'm mentally tired at the moment, very mentally tired with everything, so it's not quite the thing to talk about at the moment. But needless to say, I got myself into a bit of bother with all this. It's a deeply personal thing. It certainly is. But anyway, the US intelligence community in 1950, under something called the Collins Elite, which is something that Nick Redfern, the researcher Nick Redfern, has taken a look at, and something my book Alien Darknet will certainly be talking about, discovered that in 1950, possibly, so the rumour mill goes. We don't know whether this is true, by the way, dear listener, but basically the rumour mill goes. Discovered in 1950 that mankind was subjected to the rule of a non-human entity type intelligence via occult means, which entered our subconscious collective eons ago. The liaison with these UFOs has at times not been pleasant, and that is absolutely correct, and very unethical as well, and very worrying at times. Yet, we have been visited, it appears, by the intelligences behind the crop circles, which are astounding, and I do think that they deliver a message of hope. I've gone off-piste because we were talking about John O'Brien, weren't we? And I said the UFOs came over my house, and then I yattered on about Alien Darknet. I've gone off-piste. Yeah, John O'Brien. He does something called Truth Juice, Liverpool. And what we did is he's an excellent remote viewer. He's absolutely brilliant. We worked this target, which was the capital of North Korea, and he got it spot on, even at something called Stage 3 Subliminal Sketch, which is kind of like part 3 of a possible 13-part process. But we didn't have time to do that. We're just showing him basic remote viewing. And he got to Stage 3 of the Subliminal Sketch and drew the target. Now, that is interesting, to say the least. It's lucky as well, because there are set procedures in coordinate remote viewing where that would be actually frowned upon. But anyway, he did the target. Anyway, I started having these strange objects over my house, as they so often do. They come in from one direction, fly off in the other direction, etc., etc. And John linked into me on Facebook, and he said, we're going to do some remote viewing. He said, I'm going to do some remote viewing on all this that's going on. And he said, go outside now. I'm seeing one of these objects over your garden fence at 9 o'clock. At my 9 o'clock. And I goes outside, and sure enough, there was the thing, this dot of light that flew off at my 9 o'clock. God only knows what they possibly were, why they were there. No idea on that one. It is a long story. It'd be very difficult to explain. I'm getting to the bottom of that. But John, it is interesting to note how there was only a short space of time between John clocking that there was 2 in the vicinity with his remote viewing and me actually going into the back garden and seeing what he saw. He's pretty good, is John O'Brien, and he's on the Planet X platform broadcasting. I think he did a special on the Hollow Earth, which looks really good. I've not listened to it yet. We're talking about the crop circles, weren't we, and intelligences behind them. I learnt from my experiences that their technology is very different to ours, seeing as somebody's asked. It has been known, and this concurs with this bizarre Indian think tank that was leaking stuff into the Indian press, that their craft are artificially intelligent, and that they can develop their own awareness and just simply go off and explore. And this has happened a couple of occasions, a bit like the Windows operating system, where it goes wonky. A similar thing can happen, but probably on a more darkly hilarious scale. And I think, as always with this situation, time travel is always the elephant in the room. So you'll not hear of it in any UFO book that you've written or heard of. You won't hear of this. But ET intelligences give specific references and catchphrases that you wouldn't have read about in any book or on the internet. Very, very references to, what can we call it? I tell you what, how can I describe it? We can just say that Earth is not just a planet, it's a time zone. It's a time zone of past, present and future all rolled into one, and it's monitored very closely. Why that is, I haven't quite got that. So we'll be writing more about that when I get it into a coherency for you in my book, Alien Darknet, plug. But the time travel is the elephant in the room. It is part of the contact process, and I did conclude over the years that a single non-human intelligence is responsible for projecting all kinds of mayhem regarding ETs and UFOs into the abduction subjects. Interestingly enough, the key players in aerospace and astronautics, one in particular is a NASA scientist who I know, who I think reached for the drinks cabinet because I knew who he was. He's still not gone mainstream public. I don't think he will. He's on my YouTube channel. He was interviewed by Whitley Strieber, but he hasn't gone fully public on his contact experiences, and I do know who he is. He is in the public domain. And I asked him to come on the Tony Topping show, but he's not. He's declined. I think he was astounded that I knew who he was due to a tip-off from somebody, which is very interesting. So, and the other crazy thing is that they're keeping it quiet for some reason, and it's not spoken of in the public domain. If these guys in NASA or in aeronautics or in the defence industry are having in contact with off-world intelligences, they're not going to say a word because their professional reputations are at stake. Equally, if the Russian president or the American president or the British Prime Minister starts having Inception-style dreams with these intelligences, they're not going to say a word either about that in public. So it's interesting that the movie Inception and the movie The Matrix has this kind of subconscious collective moving around it that appears to be very, very out of sync with mainstream human society. It's all very interesting stuff. Question from Claire. Hello, Claire in Bristol, an avid horse rider and kayaker. She says to me, have you initial fear? Did you have initial fear when these events happened to you, and has this fear been transmuted now in your later years? Do you crave more encounters? And when was your last encounter? Well, the answer to that one is no, I do not crave encounters. They're at times a curse. They really are. And some of the stuff that goes on is just shocking, evasive and unethical on somebody like myself. There are a few of us out there who follow a certain characteristic of experiences where we can cross-correlate with each other and we get hit. For some reason we get hit so that we become very mentally tired because of probably how powerful we actually are, which is very interesting indeed. I know one of the more rather friendly encounters, it actually involved me relaxing myself, or being relaxed by them, and being remembered to what we had forgot as the human race. You know that solar disc that the ancient pharaohs hold up above their heads? Somehow these forces that are around us at the moment go to a great deal of painstaking time and trouble to prevent us from realising that we are part of the supreme Godhead, we are part of the Type 5 intelligence. And they go to some great lengths to distract us and have a fear-based planet. And there'll be serious consequences to that if we are not careful. Very serious consequences are being sown now as to what we are doing. What we are doing now may have very serious consequences in the future. Leaders, take note. Leaders of this world, take note. You're being warned. Told you again. They keep telling you you're being warned. But somehow, for some reason, nobody appears to be listening, which is all a bit disturbing, really. But anyway, yeah. So, I think that evasive, and I'm saying again because I'm just puzzled as to how I can communicate what I'm thinking here. I think a human being acquires the touch of something beyond an alien comprehension, believe it or not, odd as that may seem. If we look at The Fifth Way, a book by Robert Masters, he indicates in that book the term Sa Sekem Sahu. The Fifth Way, it's the book of the goddess Sekhmet. It's an amazing book, and that means the breath of life, the word of might, and this is the key, the final word, which is Sahu, which means the realized human. And interestingly enough, that is what my experiences have been all about, the realized human. You wouldn't think so. I'm a walking mental car wreck. You wouldn't think in a million years, and I certainly don't sometimes, that is the case, but that appears to be what's happened. We're being shown what we have been forgotten from eons ago, and a lot of trouble has gone into keeping this world fear-based. Very interesting. And as I keep saying, that media, it's the media equivalent of saying and it's irritating me, dear listener. As US remote viewer Lynn Buchanan once said anyway, we have the power of gods because that was our true nature. And that's absolutely correct. That is the power of God. Anyway, another person has asked, what media outlets have you contributed to? And what is the basis of my message to others? Well, that's very interesting, because I did do a lot of work for national station TalkSport. I did a lot of UFO stuff for them. I was never offered at one point in the proceedings. I could have sworn I could have got a presenter's job with them because I was never offered. I've done work for Channel 4, BBC News, BBC Regional News, and Sky. I've done all that. I've done Channel 5. I've done ITV this morning, and also we had the hoo-ha with a certain broadcaster, which was not very pleasant experience, and Ofcom got involved, and that's all water under the bridge. I've had people approach me confidentially regarding matters to do with UFOs and having to cope with the very bizarre goings on they project at you. I think I've saved one or two people's sanity in the course of that I don't have a message. I really, really don't have any message whatsoever other than actions speak louder than words. You know, it really is interesting to note the rock stars and media personalities that display interest in occult symbols. The appearance of them in adverts and music videos is a bit disturbing. And I think we as a human race appear clueless as to what is happening. Or do we? At a subliminal level we actually don't, hence all this massive awakening that's going on. Some of us are indeed very awake. In fact, some of us who are kind of like a bit Neo and have jumped the matrix will get whacked, will get targeted. I'm probably one of them, and I don't mean that from a position of grandiose either. I mean it from the fact that it would appear some of us get if we're caught leaping the fence, we're gonna get whacked, and you've got to respect fire. So you know, it's interesting. I'm hoping to become a major player in TV and publishing. Certainly am. I think the saddest part of it all, though, dear listener, is that I've never had the love of a good woman. That really is the saddest part of it all. I've been single a very, very long time. I don't choose to be. That's a television documentary in itself. I've wondered, talked to a friend about it who's very much involved in, let us say, the London jet set of all this. He reckons it would make a very good TV docky, but I'm not sure about that. Not sure about that section of my life, if it would. He's a bit of a tantric love guru, and he knows the drill with me. That is because I've had one hell of a life. I really have. Some of it involves abuse, some of it doesn't. It's just been one hell of a ride, really. And so the saddest part of my life is never really having the love of a good woman. And it really, really has been a heavy slog. And I'm always wary after my experiences. I'm always looking over my shoulder after being under surveillance like I have and all that kind of thing, as to whether that individual would be involved in all that, which I don't want. I may one day walk away from it, I don't know. But as Philip Corso said, you know, I keep saying, you know, I'm gonna have an alarm button on here. I'm gonna hit the button that says, you know, I'm gonna hit it every time I say it. I just don't like this word, you know. But I hear politicians using it. It's where I bloody picked it up from. It's a bit of a subliminal thing. I don't like it at all. Yeah, Philip Corso, though, I was just saying he witnessed an ET. So he said, if you look at his research, this ET said, a new future if we can handle it. A new future if we can handle it. And I hope we can. I really do. Taking you beyond the frontiers of high strangeness, at St Anne's-on-Sea, at the Community Centre, St Albans Road, on the 21st of September 2013, a psychic remote viewing workshop. By popular request, a one-day course on psychic remote viewing based on the techniques of the spy agencies of the Cold War is presented for you. Participants conduct an actual target session and deeply explore the techniques pioneered by the major players in remote viewing. The day includes looking at that rare information pioneered by Russian remote viewers in understanding the cosmos. Tony Topping has nearly 30 years of knowledge in dealing with UFOs and psychic espionage. He has appeared for major broadcasters from ITV to Channel 5 News. And adding further fascination to events, our special guest will be taking attendees into the fascinating world of the human aura and first steps into stereo viewing, which peers into the spiritual realm of the self using photographic technology. All attendees will receive a CD-ROM of information packed with documents on remote viewing and aura research. It's unbeatable value at a cost of £30, including refreshments. Concessions follow incomes are available. Just email Tony, opsufo@hotmail.com. Tickets are available from psychicrvevent.eventbrite.co.uk. That is psychicrvevent.eventbrite, the word bright, spelt BRITE.co.uk. Come and join us for a fantastic day.
Planet X. Strange goings on.
So with all that fuss regarding PRISM, it's the Tony Topping Show. Some random thoughts this evening with all that fuss regarding PRISM. spying, GCHQ, NSA. Oh my word, the list is well, it's absolutely unbelievable, really. The list goes on about with the level of surveillance that is actually happening. It certainly does. And interestingly enough, you may not realise that GCHQ was involved in the spying of UFOs. It was involved in looking at the UFO situation. It's very interesting that Nick Redfern, who's going to appear on the Tony Topping show, is one of my favourite researchers. For years, people have always looked at the National Security Agency, which has its operations at Fort Meade, Maryland. In another life, in another bizarre story that happened to me, I actually rang them up. It was absolutely hilarious, but we won't go into that. But I did ring them up. Bizarre but strange but true. I rang up Fort Meade for some research. It was so funny. They asked me what my political beliefs were. Did I prefer Tony Blair to somebody else? I think was what they were asking on the phone. I don't know why they asked that question, but there you go. But yes, so the equivalent of the National Security Agency, it's not the equivalent really. It's Government Communications Headquarters at Cheltenham, GCHQ. To an astonishing degree, it does have some interesting story to tell regarding UFO activity and the monitoring of that. And we got I thought what might be of interest to you, the listeners, I couldn't get hold of him, is a guy called Robin Cole. Now, Robin Cole is from years back. Robin is a very diligent researcher who looked at the GCHQ UFO link, which is far greater than many have previously realised, and it probably is actually. If you look at the NORAD, and there's something called critical UTR, which is uncorrelated target reports. I think there's another term as well, but there's something called UTR and UER. But the term UTR, and what happens is there's certain levels regarding an uncorrelated target report, which is termed a UFO. They don't use the term UFO. They use the term UTR or UER. I've just forgotten what the term UER stands for, but UTR is probably the main one. The more severe the critical report, the UTR, is at NORAD, the more it's filtered up the chain of command to Army Space Command, Navy Space Command, and Air Space Command, and of course Space Command. It's very interesting if you listen to Dr. Stephen Greer when he comes out with all those terminologies to do with magic operations, this, that and the other, all these classified code words. I understand the story goes with Dr. Stephen Greer. There was somebody who was in the Joint Chiefs of Staff who phoned somebody else up to ask what this code was, and they wouldn't let him know. Because, especially with the National Security Agency, the ethos is anybody, regardless of rank, or anybody, regardless of public position, is not allowed to know about matters to do with national security, no matter who they are. Very true. Absolutely very true. The thing with Robin Cole's research is he's been fascinated by UFOs since childhood, and in the latter part of 1996 he found himself plunged into the murky world of GCHQ following a spectacular series of UFO incidents that occurred off the east coast of England. It was shortly after 3 a.m. on the 5th of October 1996 when all hell broke loose in the skies over Norfolk and Suffolk, England. Multiple objects of unknown origin manifested themselves in British airspace, and once more they were seen by credible sources, including serving police officers. They were tracked on ground-based military radar and were viewed out at sea by the crew of a tanker named the Connor Coast. Interestingly enough, there's an interesting report by the police on the East Coast indicating they could see a strange red and green rotating light in the sky. Further to that, it looks strange and stationary. They further commented, equally commented, the unusual things were afoot at RAF Neates Head in Norfolk. There was a statement made to Coast Guard staff by Neates Head, which makes it clear what was going on. We had a report from the RAF Northwood that a civil flight had also reported strange lights in the area. They fit exactly what was seen from the ground, multicoloured, flashing, stationary lights. And at conferences that I've spoken at, quite often I'll always have somebody walk up to me and go, "They're real old boy, wink wink, I can't tell you much, but they're real old boy," and wander off. Rudloe Manor the one I had was the Rudlow Manor guy, and when I asked him a question, he'd go, "Oh, I can't comment on that. I can't comment on this." Well, what was the bloody hell the point in wandering over to me? But I'm sure you know the score on that. They say Rudlow Manor is some sort of Area 51 for UFO researchers. So, according to Robin Cole and his research regarding GCHQ and UFOs, the government is always quick to play down events in question. So the so-called misperception, atmospherics, electrical storms, they're all the order of the day. Not everyone agreed with that assertion of this incident that happened at 3 a.m. on the 5th of October 1996, when all hell broke loose in the skies over Norfolk and Suffolk and England. It was multiple objects of unknown origin manifesting themselves in British airspace, and once more they were seen, as I say, by all kinds of credible sources. It's quite interesting to note that Robin Cole had a contact that he enigmatically describes as having a close association with GCHQ. He learnt from this contact within GCHQ that during the early hours of the morning of the 5th of October 1996, 2 senior civil servants were ordered, no less, to report to GCHQ to carry out a full analysis of the situation. Gracious me. He said in his research, Robin did indicate that he had known of their occupations and their names, but the problem is if I give out too much information, it'll identify them. So at this stage, I don't want to do that. But I can tell you that one was an extremely high-up civil servant who looks at different situations which the government finds itself in, almost to the point of view of a sociologist, saying, how are the general public going to perceive this position that we find ourselves in, and things like that. I had a civil servant come up to me at a conference to indicate that in the government department she worked for, they were very they were very, very concerned regarding cattle mutilations. Another gentleman came up to me to say that he was involved in a special operation to do with monitoring phone calls to blue chip companies, and all these people coming up to me just saying a bit but not enough so that the heat isn't on them. It does go on, and I get the impression from these conferences that these UFO interactions do go on. The researcher Robin Cole, as he was called, goes deeper. He goes very deep into the world of GCHQ, highly secret. They've moved into something called the donut, a big thing that monitors phone calls and letters and all that kind of thing, as we well know from the recent scandals. But from what he gathered, GCHQ and their involvement in UFO matters also goes a bit deeper. He discovered, so he says, that GCHQ holds a number of books on the UFO subject. He stated to researcher Nick Redfern that he didn't want to reveal too much about the source of this information, but they too have a close association to GCHQ. GCHQ has this very extensive library of books and manuscripts, and the employees are apparently allowed access to it. Nick Redfern commented that he was most interested when somebody from GCHQ asked me if I had a copy of the US Air Force's UFO investigation study project Blue Book. When I said no, they said that they had a copy at work. It turns out that GCHQ has 15 or 20 UFO books in its library, and probably even more, and probably a big file on somebody like me who's got the bloody things coming at him from all directions and all that kind of thing. In fact, if they're intercepting at a subliminal level, causing all kinds of goings on at a subliminal level, then why not develop the technology to monitor somebody at a subliminal level? You see where this is going, dear listener, because that technology does definitely exist if you look at some of the deep research that's going on in the military. So, but interestingly, one GCHQ source, according to the research of Robin Cole, who lives literally across the road from a friend and colleague of his, got talking about UFOs one day. This person said, "I know nothing compared to what other departments know, but yes, occasionally we did track objects that defied all rational explanation, and I know that the speed and agility of the objects is just unbelievable. Oddly enough, I know of a guy who worked in the submarine service in the Royal Navy on sonar, and he would indicate to me that there was stuff that he was tracking on his sonar that did not resemble anything the Russians or the Americans or even the British had in terms of speed, and they just put it down to it being a dolphin or a whale. But they all knew that something fishy was going on. So the same source confided in Robin that those within GCHQ were tasked with examining data. They were convinced they were dealing with an alien technology infinitely more advanced than that of 20th century mankind. Interestingly enough, back to the conferences again, I did have somebody wander over to me to say they were involved in the Ministry of Defence. They indicated to me that it caused much hilarity, this material that did the rounds, that they could crush and they could change, and this, that, and the other. It had the effect, it had a tinfoil type look about it. They could do all sorts with it. Couldn't even tear it, and it was nudge, nudge, wink, wink, old boy, you know where that came from, kind of thing. So there's something going on, isn't there? There definitely is something going on that's just below the peripheries of being very, very top secret, above top secret, I would suggest. It's interesting because Robin Cole hit a very raw nerve with the secret world of officialdom. He'd kind of like extracted an extraordinary body of information linking GCHQ with UFOs, and he put his find together in a book that's still on the net now called GCHQ and the UFO Cover-Up. And it was interesting to say, just as his report was published, now I used to have a copy of his report but I've lost it, he was interviewed regarding its contents by Central Television, and then the following morning the phone rang and it was a detective sergeant from the Special Branch. He made it clear that he wanted to interview me, and Cole continued that shortly afterwards 2 police officers arrived and the questions took a curious turn. Who do you work for? What's your interest in the UFO phenomena? What do you do? Eventually the pair departed, apparently satisfied with the answers Graham had given them. Prior to the arrival of the officers, he had the presence of mind to hide a tape recorder in the room and duly recorded the entire conversation without the knowledge of the pair, but it did confirm its reality. Now, I've never heard the tape. I've actually never heard the tape, so I'm not too sure what the contents of the tape are. But at the time, you could get it from UFO magazine. You could actually get the actual report that Robin had done. It made interesting reading. He had official interest in his activities, which he would do. He started getting heat. On several occasions, he had unusual-looking vans parked outside his second-floor flat, right next to the telephone junction box. He's lucky. I've had UFOs coming at me, so that's, I don't just get the transit van outside, I get the UFO outside, which is bizarre. But anyway, it's something I've got to put up with, dear listener. But yeah, it could, of course, the van being near the telephone junction box could have been innocent, were it not for the fact, from research that I've read, that an insider contact was able to track the ownership of the vehicle via its licence plate to a British Ministry of Defence post office box address in Wiltshire, which is interesting. Wiltshire, Rudloe Manor, etc., etc. And, as a result of probing into the top-secret links between UFOs and GCHQ, I think Mr. Cole had attracted elements of the Special Branch and elements of the Ministry of Defence, which he would do, of course. I think we have to realise that there is some sort of interest going on within the UFO phenomena at the moment, and especially with people who are having so-called liaison with UFOs and the people involved with them. It's nothing, as I said previously, it's nothing like what you would hear on the internet. Nothing at all like that. It bears no resemblance. The data I read on the internet, in terms of books and everything like that, seems to bear no resemblance as to what really goes on. Interestingly enough, dear listener, there was an incident that happened to me on the River Ouse near Selby, revolving 2 tornado jets. And in a nutshell, I was feeling very, very down and blue on this particular evening, which is not surprising. It was at the height of my strange harassment that was going on, and I went to the river bank to just look at the river. I wasn't going to chuck myself in. I certainly wasn't. I was just looking at the river. And to this day, I don't know why I went to the river. We have an RAF base near us called RAF Church Fenton, and at RAF Church Fenton they do routine night flying. We had these 2 jets flying around the town, the perimeter of the town, doing their night flying as they normally did. They were either from there or Coningsby, or the other, I think that Coningsby, or what's the other one beginning with L? I can't remember. There's another air base beginning with L, I think, near us, but up in Lincolnshire. But yeah, we'll go for Coningsby as one of the major places, or possibly Fenton. Anyway, stood near the riverbank. This aircraft, it turns up, it was a Tornado. They have very low speed handling capabilities to tornadoes. They can slow down, much to the amazement of people. They can slow down to a very slow speed, and sure enough, I kid you not, this Tornado had seen me near the riverbank. The pilot had clocked me because he was flying low enough over the town, and he came over. He literally came over the tow bridge. He came towards me. He had a look. He kind of, like the way he flew, he just slowed right down. Now I know it was a Tornado or a Harrier, but it was a jet, and he slowed right down, and he flashed his landing lights at me twice. He went on, off at me to probably check that I was all right, and I signalled to him. Honest to God, I just put a thumbs up sign to him, and he went on his way. He increased his speed, and he flew on his way towards the farmer's field. Like as if in a trance, I wandered to the farmer's field. The air was still all around me. It was so bizarre. The air was still. There was no birds chirping. There was no traffic. It was as if the whole environment I was in was just noiseless, but yet there was activity going on all around me. Cars, traffic, etc. Wandered into this farmer's field. I wandered up the riverbank, opened the gate, and wandered into this farmer's field to see in the distance another jet. In the distance was this other jet, and I think it was heading towards York direction. And the jet that had just signalled to me, bizarre, but it had done, just signalled to me, was heading out also towards the villages of Wister, onwards towards York. Next minute, I know, which was absolutely just crazy, there's this almighty blinding flash in the field. I mean, this blinding flash of light. The pilots would have seen it. I certainly saw it. The pilot at the lead craft that was kind of like in front of the craft that I had dealt with definitely clocked what it was, because he hit the afterburners. He hit them full on. I've never seen a roar of engines like it. And he came absolutely, I can only describe it as he came tonking, bombing, what's the word we're looking for, hitting the afterburners full on, full throttle. He came all the way across this farmer's field, and then climbed. And when I looked up, dear listener, I could see flying alongside this jet. The jet was kind of like, how can I describe it? The jet was going over the river towards a village called Barby, and flying alongside it was this dot of light UFO. And to this day, I'd like to trace the pilots that were involved on that night. If you're out there, I'd like you to email me, because I'd love your participation in any TV programme. But I think you're probably, if you're out there listening, you might be under the official Secrets Act. But you know who you are. You were there, I was there. I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank the pilot that flashed his lights at me. And I've no idea what happened at that point. It's all a blur, other than the fact that this jet went just literally bombing after this dot of light thing that caused this flash in the field. It was absolutely unbelievable. And yet, as Robin Cole says, in his research, he had no way to understand what the GCHQ UFO connection is or was. One thing's for certain, he commented, that the British government states UFOs are of no defence significance. They are of great significance. Governments of this world are currently watching, and I would suggest that the governments of this world are watching them as governments from another world, and that's how it works. And we're being watched and we're being warned, and I think that is what is happening. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first time really I've yattered on without a guest. I've just done some interesting snippets of information for you tonight. We haven't had a guest this evening due to various technical issues and problems, etc., etc. But we will be getting one next week, and I'm glad that you could join us. Don't forget there's Breaking the Matrix Episode 2 on Sunday night, with a load of ground we're covering there, including the fascinating interaction in a street between the Syrian army and the Syrian freedom fighters. It's absolutely fascinating to hear the audio clip. You won't find the mainstream media covering that, but it's very interesting to listen to. All sorts about all kinds of things on Breaking the Matrix on Sunday evening at 10 o'clock after Neil Atkinson's show. And I'll be on next week again. Tony Topping Show will be on at 8 p.m. on Tuesdays. And so until then, be safe, email me your questions, and thank you for joining the Tony Topping Show. At Planet X, we don't have to be careful what we say because we might offend advertisers. We're a free speech platform. We talk about the issues that matter, from high strangeness to the New World Order to conspiracy to UFOs. We've got it all here. On Sunday evenings, you can catch Planet X live with Neil Atkinson at 8 o'clock. My show, The Tony Topping Show, at 8 p.m, taking you into the world of high strangeness at a professional level. We've got the Ben Emmeline Jones Show, Wednesdays, 8 p.m, New World Order researcher and, of course, UFO researcher Darren Perks. He's on Thursdays at 8 p.m. I am the man who was chased by UFOs, filmed by unmarked helicopters, and stalked by a covert government agency. I'm a paranormal Jason Bourne. This is the Tony Topping Show, 8 p.m, Tuesdays.
You're listening to Planet X.
UFO experiences going through hijinks. My story is one to be concerned about when it comes to outside agencies sticking in their nose in the lives of the world's citizens, and they usually do this rudely and abruptly and in sneering ways. When what an explorer actually needs is compassion and someone to talk to. But instead we are often met by the strange, cold, powerful forces who treat us like meat from a lamb usually sent off to the slaughter, where we never forget what it sounds like when the lambs scream. Our voices will not be stopped, and we really won't. And so I'm gonna, we fire one more catapult at the wall of secrecy with my radio show, my website, all the work that I do. Oddly enough, dear listener, I sometimes feel the old Manchurian candidate programming kick in, where the accepted view of the world is acceptable to me, and that's a very odd feeling indeed. But luckily I know different. I know not to trust the world around me after all the experiences I have had. So it's all very interesting, and readers have been, readers and listeners, readers of my website and listeners to the Tony... Good evening, it's 8 o'clock, it's the Tony Topping Show. We're back with you. Hello, how are you all? What are you up to, and what are you doing out there in the big wide world tonight? It's all very interesting goings on with Syria. And next week we've got episode 2 of Breaking the Matrix, with a new kind of current affairs financial conspiracy show. We're trying to hook up an interview with George Galloway, which we will do in due course, and we're making sure that it's all going to be very interesting stuff once we get him on the show. I think the things are going to really take off. We're going to get some guest lines up. It's going to be absolutely excellent. Some listeners have been emailing me some questions regarding myself, and really, it's when it comes to the dark side of espionage and.
This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill.
Do not be afraid. We are now in control of what you hear.
1, 2, 3, testing.
A journey to the far reaches of knowledge and the unknown.
I can't believe I just saw that.
From aliens to angels, conspiracies to cover-ups.
One soul and preeminent power.
From extraterrestrials to exposing the truth.
I'll try to explain as much as I can.
You're listening to Planet X.
You're listening to Planet X.
Planet X. This is Planet X. Planet X.
Broadcasting to you from the studios of Planet X, this is the Tony Topping Show. Was walking home from work, believe it or not. It's a very long story, but basically the world is not as it appears to be. There are forces that have been around mankind for a very long time that we don't see around us, that are kind of like removed from our reality as a general populace, and that's a very interesting story, because the UFO situations has its tentacles in many things, including Antarctica. Britain had operations in Antarctica under something called Operation Tabalan. I've been filmed by unmarked helicopters on 2 occasions. We're going to, I think in the coming weeks, we're going to do something, or we have done something with a company called Filterview Films, where I take the audience or the viewer through the experience of being on film by a helicopter. I've been followed. I've had the phone calls. I'll probably go to the grave not knowing what happened to me, but my first initial UFO encounter was in 1992, and one listener asks, can you tell us about my initial UFO encounter and what took place? So there we go, Barry. What took place? Well, I was coming back from a rehearsal topping show. I've been sending in questions because they may not have heard of me, and I think that Planet X has nearly now, Neil's show on a Sunday has an audience, I think, of over 45,000 people all across the world, so there's a possibility some people may not have seen my website. Somebody's asked, some listener sent in an email to say, would you give some background on yourself before your UFO encounters began? So, I've been dominated by paranormal experiences all my life from age 2. My father was a very psychic man, and he could actually collapse me onto the bed with a headache. I really never got on with him. My background was acting and then security management, but I do this UFO stuff full time. Although it's not easy. I'm a specialist contributor and writer, now becoming a broadcaster on paranormal espionage and UFOs. And that I've been witness to some insane goings-on. I really have. Can't lead a normal life. I've been attacked by UFOs twice. One in a farmer's field and another. There was one in a farmer's field and another when I